All right. Hey, it's Ian, and this is my learning journey video for apprenticing with a problem. We're going to start out with a project timeline, go down some key learning points, finish off with next steps, and how I hope to continue the work I did in this project in future quarters. So, as far as how the project went initially, of course it started with my problem identification. I chose the issue of off-campus students not having enough information about what's going on campus because that applied to me, and that was something that was impacting my experience this year going to Western, and therefore I felt more connected with it and was really driven to find a solution. The next step after that was deciding which specific clubs I wanted to go to and get their opinions on how this disconnect was happening. Initially, as you can see in my initial calendaring in SL1, I had an overwhelming list that wasn't realistic in the end. And I made a big point of this because I had to narrow it down. I ended up going to 3 clubs, went to a board game club, fencing club, and formula racing club. And after going to all 3 of those clubs, I pivoted and realized I'm trying to solve a problem that impacts clubs, but the people that are really having this problem, feeling this disconnect, are off-campus students. So I started interviewing off-campus students. Those are the bulk of the interviews that I have in my support materials folder. Basically, a lot of the feedback I got during those interviews was like people didn't know that there was an online calendar for clubs and events through Western's website. A lot of people just depended on the club fair at the start of the year. And there were a lot of introverts who didn't know anybody who were going to clubs, and they didn't want to go because they didn't want to be surrounded by strangers. And so after all that and figuring out what the problem was and problems that I hadn't thought about, I started thinking solutions, how I could solve this, and we'll get more into that later on as next steps. Then finally finished off this quarter of the pitch that I feel went really well. I got some really good feedback on the solution ideas I had, so I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that. Some key learning points: more minds is more solutions, I think is one of the biggest ones. But this was like every interview I had with an off-campus student, another point was brought up for another problem that I hadn't thought of or another possible solution that I hadn't thought of. And that was fantastic. I know typically when we think more minds is better, we think about feedback, but with this, the solutions and the problems were really awesome in that research. Similar communities are not identical. I wanted to highlight this because initially, I was only going in to build empathy with clubs, and I only realized once I got into that community that the club community and the off-campus community, I wasn't going to get the same information out of one as I would the other. So keeping that in mind, even if I think that 2 communities are going to have similar needs, it's worth getting out and researching in both. I realized, mainly through the fencing club, that sometimes you're not going to get invited in, and that's okay. Going to fencing club was really awkward. It was a really cliqued group of people, and it didn't last very long for me. And that was something that I came to grips with and was uncomfortable with at first because I don't like the feeling of not fitting in, but at the same time I kind of realized that that's a group that was formed and they're all really tight, and it was just hard for me to get in when I went. So that's the thing that I want to hold with me moving forward. Starting early is irrelevant, and I feel like this is really worth highlighting because as you know, a lot of people didn't start this project until pretty late on in the process. I started mine pretty early as far as going to clubs, but I realized that I ended up, like, it's not so much about starting early and putting in the time, it's about putting in meaningful time. And I realized that, like, at the start, the reason I feel like I ran into this issue of thinking that like clubs and off-campus students were having the same problems was just because I wasn't putting as much effort as I should have into the initial planning process. So by starting early is irrelevant, what I mean is the amount of time you have doesn't matter. It's how meaningfully you use that time that's going to affect the outcome of your project. And I know that I can do it. I did this project by myself. I was the only one in my group, and it's the first solo project I've done I think at Weston so far. Every other project I've done has been part of a team, and it was really refreshing, I think, and good to know that, yeah, I can do something on my own. As far as next steps, what do I want to do next? If I choose to continue this project, there were two main solution ideas that I thought of and that other people proposed to me. The one that I was initially planning on doing and was getting feedback on throughout the process was designing something new. Off-campus students don't know what OrgSync is. None of them even knew that AS had a calendar of events and clubs. So I think designing a new online calendar solely focused at marketing clubs and events, I think would be very welcomed. I only received positive feedback on that idea. It would just be a lot of work on my part because I don't know how to design a website or an app or something like that. So that would be new territory for me, which isn't bad, but it's something to think about. An idea that was brought up when I was pitching this idea too is instead of creating something new, I could use an existing platform to market. And the idea that was brought up through this is, so instead of creating a new platform, I could pitch a job to associated students, call myself a club social media marketing coordinator, and basically what would happen is I would get paid by clubs or by AS or whatever, and any clubs that have an active social media profile, I would kind of consolidate that all into one place so that way students don't have to track down clubs. They're just like my one page, and I would deliver all of the information about clubs and events all to them. So something to think about, something to develop. I'm interested in that. The other thing I'm thinking about is doing something completely different. I was talking to Lucille and Avery a little while ago, just because we've been reflecting a lot on the success of Maker's Market, and we think that revamping that, because we already have all the planning that we did, and the initial event went so well, so we think if we revamped it with a smaller team, we could have a lot more success, we could get it planned and ready to go in a shorter amount of time, and that could be a really cool thing. I'm also talking with Austin Harper about jumping in on his game club that he wants to start. I love games, I love having fun, and I'm super into the mission statement he was pitching with his club. So might do that, might do Maker's Market, might continue one of these. With the empathy I built this quarter. Overall, I've got a lot to think about this summer, but I think this project was really good for me to be able to build empathy, get to know some communities, and get comfortable with a lot of the tools that I use. Yeah, so thank you.